Welcome to Deeper with Darshana, where we skip the small talk and dive down into what's raw and real. Pleasure, shame, justice, power, healing, liberation. These essential aspects of our human experience are among my favorite topics to explore, and I'm inviting you to join me. I'm your host, Darshana Avila, somatic sex and trauma expert and creator of the Erotic Wholeness Method. It is my belief that we are erotic by nature, and our erotic nature encompasses so much more than you might realize. Come along as I drop into curious conversations with other passionate pros and sensual seekers, and occasionally share musings of my own. Bring your curiosity, your sacred, messy, beautiful humanity, and all the parts of yourself. And let's go deeper together. In today's episode, you get to hear me in full-out fangirl mode with the amazing Kai Cheng Thom. Kai is a professional peer of mine, and this was our first time actually dropping into a deep conversation about all manner of juicy subjects, the connection between social work, activism, and sex work, how it is that she and her journey went from shirking away from pleasure to now not being able to imagine a world or liberation movements without pleasure at the center. She shares about how important it is to advocate for what we really want when it comes to building genuine intimacy, and dropped the best spin on a body as flower metaphor that I have ever heard. So listen up, and please make sure that if you love what you're about to hear, that you let us know. I'll see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Deeper with Darshana. So happy that you're here, and I am extra happy that you're going to get to hear Kai Cheng Thom in conversation with us today. Kai is an author, a performer, and an expert in the fields of trauma healing, somatics, and conflict transformation. And a common thread weaving throughout all of her work is service to individual and collective healing and transformation, which big yes to all of that. Kai, thank you for being here. Hello.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I told you before this interview started, and I will tell you again, you are a celebrity to me. So I'm like, wow, I get to be on this call with you. Thanks so much. I'm really excited.
And that is a genuinely mutual feeling. It's so fun to have our fangirl moments, and when we're professional peers to get to geek out together. And so our conversation today is going to be put under the heading of pleasure activism, which is something dear to my heart. Thank you, Adrienne Marie Brown, for your Bible that you've written for us.
Thank you.
And those listening, if you are not familiar with Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Pleasure Activism, please go get yourself a copy. And beyond that, I'd love to start by asking you, Kai, what pleasure activism means to you personally. So there's AMB's take on it, but as you live that, breathe that, have your professional life organize around that, what's it like for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's still, honestly, it's kind of like wet, wild, and weird, you know? I have to confess, you know, I have something to confess, which is when AMB's amazing volume, Pleasure Activism, came out, I struggled so much because I was so disconnected from my own pleasure at the time. And I even have like a dear friend and mentor, Chanel Gallant, who wrote a chapter for that book. And so I ran out and got it as soon as it came out. And then I was like, oh, pleasure activism. And my whole body kind of crunched up the way it's doing now. And I was like, pleasure, why? Maybe for other people. Maybe that's a white people thing. Maybe that's a cis people thing. I don't know. Pleasure. And then, you know, I went through this whole cycle and spiral with it because it was really hard for me to imagine a world in which pleasure was the central organizing principle. And now, of course, it's really hard for me to imagine a liberation movement or a social change movement that doesn't have pleasure as a central organizing principle. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, no, I think a lot of things. So first, what you spoke to there about your direct experience initially speaks to a wider phenomenon in our culture, which is the idea that certain people get to have pleasure and others don't. And many of us have internalized that knowingly or unknowingly.
So I just am flagging that that's really a thing for many of us. Who has a right to their pleasure? What kind of pleasure is a hot topic. And now the fast forward of any kind of justice oriented movement that doesn't include pleasure, I'm like, fuck yes, because that's the cultural transformation right there. Instead of the deep work always having to feel like arduous, hard work, what happens when we center it around nurturance and sustenance and joy and sensuality and connection? Like, to me, that's the juiciest topic of all. So I think we're very much aligned on how we can envision it presently. Tell us more about the journey then, from what are you talking about pleasure to I can't even imagine a world without that.
Absolutely. Well, the journey was like long and arduous, but also kind of fun, and like dangerous, treacherous, all these things. So, condensing a lot of years into like a nutshell, I was born in Vancouver to a Chinese diasporic community. And then I moved to Montreal, which is an extremely gay city. I just have to say, Montreal, Canada, full of queerness, full of great activism, full of amazing art. And that was where I was first introduced to like a queer politic around sexuality. And then I had this funny moment where I was doing queer activism as a young adult in Montreal. I was also going to social work school, and I was doing sex work to pay for my life, and also like to explore myself. Let me be real, yeah. Like there's a lot of things going on there, and it's funny because intellectually I knew that there was a connection between these things, between activism, between the healing work that sometimes happens in the social work space, although social work is a very fraught profession, and the healing work that was happening in the sex work space, although sex work is also a very fraught profession for other reasons. I guess that the disconnection was that I wasn't really thinking about my own pleasure. I really was so deeply conditioned to believe that my pleasure was like secondary. It didn't matter, or that liberation was more important than pleasure. I hadn't connected that pleasure was a form of liberation. And I had all these really deeply ingrained beliefs that pleasure was sinful and frivolous and extravagant, and I connected it to laziness, like all of these really intense things. I was also raised evangelical Christian, so there you go. Yes.
Add that to the mix.
Just, for extra spice. And then I guess, I had a lot of stories too about being an Asian person, an Asian woman, a transgender woman, and believing that my pleasure was dangerous to others. That even today, unfortunately, many queer people, many trans women in particular, are living inside of a narrative that says that our bodies and our pleasure is dangerous to others, is predatory to others, is connected to HIV/AIDS, and then there's a lot of stigma attached to HIV/AIDS, which there should not be. So there's a lot of heavy, right? A lot of layers. And then I attended my transformation story is like I was doing sex work one day with a cisgender white man, and he had this unfolding that happened. It was so strange. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but I thought I was just giving him like a rub down and a hand job, and he started to cry and have like memories swirl up. And he said he was healed at the end, but he also looked very shaken. I was very shaken too. And I was like, what is going on? Oh my God. I need some help. Nothing in social work school had prepared me for this, because, you're not taught to do social work while naked and giving somebody a hand job. They really frown on that in the social work field. So I went looking for a space that could help me understand. And I found this thing that you and I both know as sexological bodywork and somatic sex education, which is a profession that does hands-on erotic healing and education for people of various kinds. And that was where, in that place of many different people, many sex workers, many queer people, many straight people, many people of many kinds, where I got to experience the fractal of my own embodied pleasure being a part of the healing of the world. You know?
That's all.
Just
That
tiny little thing. I was like, what? It was so transformative. So that kind of is what happened. Is like I was inexorably drawn to sex and pleasure, but I didn't believe that it was for me. And then I had to face the scariest thing, which is that pleasure is for me, and that my pleasure is a part of the healing of the world in the same way that everyone's pleasure is a part of the healing of the world.
Mic drop right there. Yes. And you know, what I'm hearing in that, a lot of us nowadays, we talk about I got radicalized by fill in the blank. And so, you know, as a white American, many of us might say, I got radicalized by George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, or I got radicalized by the genocide in Palestine, or, you know, like we can point to these things. And in a certain regard, I almost hear a story for you that is, I got radicalized by pleasure. Because you were already focused on activism, you were already focused on collective liberation and justice, but you didn't recognize that pleasure was a part of that, and that's kind of what radicalized you.
Exactly. Yes. I became an evangelist for pleasure by pleasure.
Okay. Well, I definitely have a bias there. If you're going to be an evangelist, that's the right one.
Thank you.
So, okay, this vignette that you painted about the client who had that, would it be fair to say like a spontaneous healing experience with?
Yes, I that's what I think it was. Yeah,
it's so beautiful, because what you described sounds really similar to what I have happen fairly often with my clients, which is to say that as we deepen into our work together and progress to the point where arousal and stimulation and orgasm are part of what's in the mix, it's a really common experience then that there's tears and there's a big release, and it can feel cathartic in its way. But, you know, we don't always have conversations about what are the mechanics that allow that to be. And really, I liken it to a thawing out or a cracking open in the best possible sense of those terms. That's like kind of what happens. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience as a practitioner, or your experience personally with that thawing out and opening up to pleasure journey, and what are like the chapters that you see people move through to get there?
Oh yeah, I love that description of the thawing out. And I definitely feel that arc in myself and see it in my clients. And of course, each body really is unique.
Yes.
And there are some parallel themes that we can observe that are kind of common or almost universal. And I guess what I see a lot actually is, so I work with a lot of different people of a lot of different identities in my own practice. And what's really interesting is, although our experience in the world is often very different because of our privilege and our different social locations, the different amounts of power or access to money and education we have, almost everyone that I see comes in with a similar story, which is the story of pleasure is not for me, it's for somebody else.
As we said at the start, yeah. So many of us have internalized that.
Right? And people think that because they are a cisgender woman, then the pleasure is not for them. Or they think because they're a certain age, pleasure is not for them. They think because they're trans, racialized, all these kinds of things. We're all taught that because of this something about you,
right,
you don't deserve pleasure. So there's a lot of shame and a lot of shielding around pleasure. When you speak about that freezing or frozenness, I am thinking about how I often see clients at the beginning of an arc of transformation who have a lot of contraction in their body, or sometimes we say somatic armoring, where it's this
tightness. Yeah.
Exactly. The tightness. And sometimes it's like a tightness that's very subtle, so it looks like kind of like a floppiness, but the tightness is internal. It's like a weaving of the tissues, literal physiological tissues, of course, against sensation, to defend against the sensations of arousal, of pleasure, of interconnectivity. And of course, there are so many good reasons for this defendedness, this frozenness, this armor. It is often about keeping out what is seen as sinful. It is often about getting through the unbearable experiences of abuse and sexual violence that unfortunately so many people are exposed to over the course of their lives. So there's this sense in the body that pleasure and arousal are very dangerous, and the body is braced against it. And then wrapped inside that bracing, that frozenness, is the affect of shame, right? Like the feeling of like, well, I've got to shrink away from this because I'm bad and this is bad. And I mean, I'm sure you see and do similar things. The process that happens in the arc of transformation for me is first a validation of whatever in the body is saying no to, like the body has the right to say no to.
Yes, it's honoring that these protective strategies are wise in their ways, and having the agency to say, I can protect myself as I choose, like, which isn't always a conscious choosing, but we got to give credit to our beautiful nervous systems and the ways that they work really hard to keep us safe.
Exactly. You know, we can't, if it, you know, when a flower curls itself up against the rain or the cold, we don't pry open the petals and say, open flower, or, well, you know, we could, but it doesn't really do what we hope it does.
Right.
A flower needs to experience sunlight and gentle rain, usually, to open, and the body needs to experience validation, affirmation, support, and pleasure.
That's a really gorgeous metaphor that you just went with there, because yeah, you know, like you can go poking your finger into a flower bud that's closed itself up and good luck. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to probably destroy it in the process. Yet if you give it the conditions, if you create the container and the circumstances for that expansion, that unfolding to happen, then it's going to produce this big, beautiful bloom that could never be forced, because it's just so beyond forcing. And I love that as a metaphor for what goes on in our bodies as we are choosing to come out from behind these protective strategies and unfold ourselves, as it were.
I'm so happy that you like my metaphor. Thank you so
much. Done. Well done.
I have to say, little aside, is that this flower metaphor, it's like a redoing of this metaphor they often tell in Sunday school, or like in Christian summer camp. They say your virginity is a flower, and if you give it away or you step on it, then, you know, whatever. It's kind of a metaphor about purity. Yeah. But I'm like, yeah, it is. The body is a flower. It deserves sunlight. You know?
And gentle rain and a warm breeze and all the good things.
Rich soils, you know, exactly the right environment. The flower, it takes its time. And you know what? As many bees and butterflies can come by that flower as the flower wants. You know, like you know, whatever. We can roll on and on with this metaphor, right? But of course, it is about bodies and beings taking the time that they need and being honored for what they are.
Yeah.
So
it's the pace of presence is what that's what I refer to it as, you know, in my work with clients. Like,
okay, I'm writing this down. What was the pace of presence? We're going to take things from each other to put into our practices.
But moving at the pace of presence to me is simply that we're honoring what's here in the present moment and we're adapting accordingly. So I had a client on my table just yesterday who is coming in with a lot of medical trauma, had a radical hysterectomy that was not handled in the best possible way as part of cancer treatment. And she's so disconnected from her body right now, but really, really wants to do this work. And we're 4 sessions in, and it was going to be the first time that my finger was going to enter her vulva and vagina. And she was a big yes to this until her body said no. Yeah. And so for us to move at the pace of presence meant we paused and we directed attention elsewhere for a while. And then when she felt a readiness, she said to me, okay, I'd like to try again. Not me with my agenda. So that to me is the pace of presence. And the natural world moves at that pace. We humans like to put ourselves above or outside of those natural rhythms, and thus yes. Here we are. So, okay, I want to go back to something before we get too far away from it. You started to talk a little bit about shame as part of what is woven into the freeze process for many of us, and what is fueling this notion that regardless of what our identities are, many of us believe our identity is exempted from pleasure somehow. and carry a lot of shame around that. So for those of us, which is to say many, who have internalized shame in their bodies, about their desires, their relationship to pleasure, like, where does one even begin the process of de-shaming or, unwinding that shame?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I actually just felt like a whisper, like tingles kind of going through my body as you asked that question. Where does one go? I mean, I was going to give a technical answer, but actually what happened as I was listening to your question was I thought about this really, really powerful ritual that I experienced as part of doing a demo, like teaching students, sexological body workers, with one of my co-faculty, Corrine Diachuk, who teaches at the Institute for Somatic Sex Ed with me and a bunch of other folks. So we were doing a demonstration around bringing racial justice and somatics together before, it was really cool. Before doing erotic work, it was cool, it was wild, it was edgy, the de-shaming process that came up for me there was, I've done a lot of work. I had done a lot of work before this ritual around being trans and having shame around my sexuality. And I had done very little work actually around being an Asian woman. And before that, being identified as an Asian man, and shame around my sexuality. So, I made up this ritual on the spot and, I asked Corrine to help me co-create it in the moment. That was about acknowledging the impact of colonization and white supremacy on my body as an Asian person with a sexuality. And of course, the stereotypes there are that East Asian women are hypersexual, supposedly, and that East Asian men are supposedly asexual or desexualized.
Right. Which is quite a dichotomy then for you as an Asian trans woman.
Oh yeah,
you've got the full there.
It was very confusing, let me tell you. And I mean the embodied experience of that is that when I was trying to identify as a gay man and find gay male lovers or queer men lovers, I got very little attention and very little affirmation. But then when I came out as a trans woman and transitioned, I got a huge amount of attention, mostly from straight identified men, but it always had to be in secret. These men didn't want to have their eroticism in public. So, it was very shaming both directions, I have to say. And we did this kind of embodied movement of me speaking back to white supremacy through gesture and through breath, and my colleague kind of embodying the role of whiteness, listening and responding to that. And it was wild, like the amount of emotion that moved through my body, and like the sense of, I had this kind of sense, whether we believe in ghosts or not, like I had the kind of embodied sense of a lot of ancestry and lineage moving through me. And all of this is to say, like, I think what I needed in that moment around unshaming and de-shaming, the freeze in my body that came from racism and sexuality together, was to be held and witnessed as part of a legacy of violence and eradication that was bigger than myself. And if I can try and extrapolate that to like a general principle for the work and the play that we do, I think it is that many people need to be held in a sacred container where the stories that have been pushed into our bodies or forced onto our bodies by society can be given life and spoken back to. Does that make sense at all? What do you think about that?
It does. I mean, what I'm hearing, first of all, that emergent ritual sounds like such a massively meaningful and empowering experience. So I love that you got to have that. And to your question of, the containers matter so much. Having a safe and sacred space where, whether or not those stories are consciously articulated in the way that you are able to do, the body's holding the stories, right? So I noticed this with my clients, that for some people, like, for instance, the client I just made mention of, who knows what has happened and why they're experiencing their freeze, they were also then able to say, oh, this particular thing during my treatment, I'm remembering it now. I'm seeing my feet in the stirrups. I need my legs to be touched so that I can reclaim connection to that part of my body. Like, they got to do it with a very verbal narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone does, and not everyone needs that. But I think what the common thread is we need a safe container for our body to unwind that story and to make space for something new to be written, as it were. The other thing that I'm hearing is how de-shaming in this instance, for you in particular, but I'm sure all of us, wherever we're located in terms of social identity and stratification, that de-shaming our desire is decolonial practice.
Absolutely.
And there's a leveling of the playing field, I believe, then, that when we actually do that work, we get to be together human to human. And those layers, like, and, you know, as a white cis woman, I want to be mindful of saying evening the playing field, and also in the most benevolent sense of that. Like, we get to then be together, whoever is in that space, practitioner, client, lover to lover, community, or what have you, where our humanity is the common ground, and those other layers kind of get to fall to the wayside, which, utopic as that may seem, certainly is the world that I would love to be living in.
Oh yeah, it seems like the funnest, most pleasurable world to be living in, you know?
Yeah. So I want to take this a little further, whether this is, you know, how you guide your clients or things you've lived in your body. What are some of the practices, like the actual ways to begin the de-shaming process, particularly if someone is listening and newly hearing resonance in what we're discussing and is like, I need this, I want this? Like, what are some of the ways you guide folks?
Yes, well, let's see. I think the beginning for me, and I would love to hear what it is for you as well, Darshana, because I think we all have a slightly different ways of doing things. Is I love to do that practice, which is such a small, simple practice that we do as sexological body workers. That's about supporting or facilitating a client, or we can facilitate ourselves as well, to find a comfortable spot and get really comfortable. Sometimes I have clients build a nest out of pillows and yoga props or whatever we have around, blankets. I often invite clients to bring sacred objects like photographs or images or special rocks, whatever they have, to build like a nest of comfort for themselves, just to see what that's like, to really spend like 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, really building support for one's body, where the only focus is, am I comfortable?
I love that.
It's I love it too. It's one of my favorite ones. And it's amazingly evocative for many, many people, because of course, comfort is, for many, the first step or the doorway to pleasure. And so many people do not allow themselves or are not allowed by society even that much to say, I deserve to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I get to be comfortable.
Yeah.
What would happen if I believed that?
It's so interesting. So what's coming to mind for me in my work studio, there's a sofa, there's a chair, there's floor space. And typically speaking, when clients come in newly, they take a seat on the sofa and I take a seat in a chair. And most of the time, you know, because that's like our associations with therapy. And most of the time they sit like very upright and straight until I say, like, please do what feels right to your body. Stretch out, spread out, fluff the pillows. We're not standing on ceremony. The one client in recent memory who did not need my say-so to sprawl out happened to be a white cis man.
Oh, how interesting.
And it is, I mean, not surprising, but it feels worth saying. It's like, you know, so here we have white cis men, and I love white cis men. I mean, not all of them, but
I am married to, yeah.
You're married. I was never married to a white cis man. I was married to a brown cis man. I digress. So this client, you know, because of his privilege, because of how he gets to walk in the world, his body, like, he's like, yeah, I'm sprawling out on the couch, literally legs kicked up. And I was like, cool, I love this. what is it going to take for me to get more of my female clients to do this, more of the women, more of the queer folks to be able to inhabit that degree of comfort and ease in their body? I mean, because some people, even with my invitation and my modeling of it, because I'm fluffing my pillows, I'm sitting crisscross legs, I'm doing what feels good, I fidget around when I need to fidget, I when I need to ha. And a lot of us, even with the modeling, even with the permission, struggle to center our comfort. And I feel like there's a very close connection too between like, do we feel a right to our comfort? Do we feel a right to our boundaries? Do we feel a right to our preferences? Do we feel a right to our desires, which are all the fundamental building blocks of the kind of work that you and I guide our folks through? I don't even know that there's a question in here. I'm just going to leave my statement in the air and see what you want to say back.
Oh, no, there's like 1,000 things I want to say back, but let me try and pick the one that's most salient for, well, yes. I mean, I think the piece about, what happens when the client walks into the sexological bodywork studio is such a big question, because even in a private, kind of container that the client knows is for them, there's all of this conditioning that's about like sitting up straight and being kind of contained. And when I think about the stereotype of like the white cis man, what's the term, man spreading, right? Like there's this idea of like, oh, well, they spread and they slump, and there's kind of even like a shaming around this. I'm kind of like, well, it would be great if we could all spread, whatever woman spread, non-binary spread, if all of us in our genders and our racial locations and all of our identities could feel and experience a world that supported us to take up more space. How de-shaming would that be? I mean, I think about how women are conditioned to sit in the dominant culture, and it's always about this like sit up straight and don't spread your legs, and there is this like very intense erotic shaming that's attached to that, and this idea of spreading the legs metaphorically or literally. And I'm like, okay, that's really intense. We are taught that to be good, we have to be uncomfortable and like kind of hiding any sense of our own pleasure in eroticism while also being erotically available to the public in the way that the public wants us to be. It's so intense.
The intrinsic confusion, the double standard.
Right. There's always like it's a double bind. Like you can never do it right, But
right, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly, and I think that a lot of the contemporary feminism, second and third, and like kind of new fourth wave feminism have done a lot of work around de-shaming the no. Like they're like, women get to say no, people get to say no to what you don't want. But I think we have yet to do a good job as a collective around de-shaming the yes to what you do want.
Oh my gosh, totally. Because what I find is I do work with a lot of cis women. Most of my clients are cis women or cis non-binary females. And there is a lot around that, particularly when it comes to themes of dominance and submission. And I've had it, both sides of the slash, as we say in the kink world. So I have worked with women who have a really hard time acknowledging that they want to be taken, because their feminism, their hyper independence, their sense of it's not okay for me to depend on someone, to want so much from another person, to give my power away. That's got its own story associated with it. But I've also worked with a number of clients who really actually desire their own dominance to be part of their erotic expression in their life. And that's an edgy one too. And I love helping women crack that one.
Oh my God, your face completely changed when you said
I'm like,
oh, you really do love it.
Really though, because what it is, it's such a beautiful, to your point, exemplification and embodiment of celebrating our yes with beyond what our cultural narratives have taught us is the quote unquote right or wrong way to be. It's such an expansive experience to feel your power. And I know this for myself because I initially understood myself as a right side of the slash person, which is to say I wanted more submission and more surrender, really is the word that I identify with more than submission, to feel like I can completely let my guard down. But then I started to understand that I had a wider appetite than that. And
Yes.
and it was a really interesting thing when connecting with male-bodied partners around this who were game for it. I was so afraid in the beginning. I'm like, wait a minute, is this okay? Is it like am I allowed to step on your junk? Because that's what you're telling me you want. And only with consent, y'all, those who are listening.
Only with consent.
But it, to recognize, like, what do I want to say here? There is something so beautifully empowering in recognizing that desire within oneself, but then also the beauty of being met by another whose desires happen to match. And when we're not giving space to our yes, we're not allowing the people around us to know us fully, to meet us fully. And so it's a disservice in all directions, because the vulnerability and the intimacy that we crave, we actually block that when we do not give permission for our desire to be there unabashedly.
Oh, I just want to do like a standing ovation, I'm like, yes, exactly. Like, we don't do anyone favors when we withhold permission to have pleasure, to say yes. It's so deepening. It's so trust building in an intimate container within consent and empowered choice to ask for what we want. And there are so many couples, I'm sure you see this all the time in your practice too, couples where neither person is really asking for what they want. And they're great couples. They're loving couples. They're like, I want to please my partner. I would really love to please my partner. It's all about them. And I'm like, okay, so you're both just going in a little circle of,
this is
trying to be good
for my lesbians. I hate the stereotype. I love my lesbians, and they're the epitome of this.
I wasn't going to say it, but that's also the trend for me.
And I mean, like, held lightly, because it shows up in cis couples that I work with,
of
too.
course.
But I think what that is pointing to is the acculturation, those of us who are born and treated as girls and women and take on a lot of the people pleasing as dominant protective strategy. We're so focused on how to give another person the experience that we believe they want from us that we don't even have a freaking clue about our genuine desires, let alone the skill to bring it into the center of our experience. So when I work with lesbians in particular, although this applies when I work with individual women or cis couples, really just identifying desire and cultivating the communication skills is such a deeply important piece of the pie, because you got to start with those basic building blocks in order to then go on to having an embodied experience of this.
Exactly. Well, it's so funny. I mean, people come to a somatic sex educator or sexological body worker, and, I think a lot of them think, okay, and then we're going to be naked and I'm going to be getting an erotic massage. And certainly that can happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, a de-shaming practice that I often start with is, maybe you do this one too, is the desire list. Write down a list of fantasies that turn you on.
Mm-hmm.
And like that alone, it's delicious. It can be done as a game in couples or thruples or polycules too. It's very hot, but it's also quite vulnerable. Like writing, let's just spend 5 minutes without thinking or censoring, writing down a list of fantasies that are hot. And they might even be fantasies that you never pursue, but it is the act of acknowledging that we have fantasies, that we have desires. Oh, and then we might read them out loud as well. This brings up so much. I mean, I once spent I think 3 75-minute sessions with someone just on her desire list and unpacking what came up.
I love hearing that. So yes, I do get into desire and fantasy with clients, and we often, I do more initially around needs with a lot of clients, which is to say that the idea of being seen as needy is something that a lot of folks have to get over. That it's like, yeah, I need to be considered. I need to be respected. I need to have a growth-oriented dynamic. Like to acknowledge our intrinsic neediness is a stepping stone I take a lot of clients through, because they can't even get that out of their mouths, never mind their hottest sexual fantasy that they have yet to articulate. So I love that you spend so much time on the desire. And I think that some people, in my experience, even need They need permission to need before they're even available to the wanting. And yeah, and it's such an important thing any way you slice it. I also have encountered a lot of my clients saying, I don't fantasize.
Yes.
You know, like, and my answer to that is like, look, let's like the lowest barrier to entry definition of a fantasy. Anything that you might want a little bit that turns you on even slightly that isn't happening right now, you know?
Exactly. I fantasize about someone baking me an apple pie. It's still perfect fantasy to start with.
Exactly. You know, like, oh, they got my morning chai made just like I like it. Fantasy, you know, like, yeah. So yeah, it's sometimes we really need a gentler approach, if you will, to being able to explore these realms, because, you know, I'm making assumptions here. Correct me if I'm wrong. You and I probably could tick off a list of our fantasies with relative ease and comfort at this point.
At this point, yeah.
But not always so. And for many people, that's an incredibly daunting proposition. So it's really like creating a nice, gentle on-ramp for folks to be able to explore these things is, to me, such an intrinsic part of the de-shaming and the opening up to more expansive, embodied experience of the sort that we're speaking of here.
Yes. And I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, for folks listening to the podcast, like, oh, why not try both, right? Like, write a list of needs, write a list of wants or desires, read them to somebody.
Oh my God.
What happens?
Because I was going to ask you as kind of a beginning to wrap up question, if you had a simple suggestion or a practice that somebody listening might, and you just did it. And I think it's a beautiful one. So dear listener, I hope you will consider that. Like, write down 3 things that fall under the category of need and 3 things that fall under the category of want/desire. Like, just start small, like, see what's there. It's such a beautiful way to get to know yourself, to foster more intimacy with your own self in order to then, when and as you choose, share more intimately with another.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do it after this call too.
Oh, I love it. You can send it to me if you want. This has been just such a deliciously enjoyable conversation, Kai. Is there anything else that's like bubbling to the surface for you to want to speak to, offer before we wind our time down today?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Top 5 podcast interviews, top 5 interviews I've ever done. You know, really, really exciting. I guess, yeah, there's 2 quick things I would say, which is, I guess one is I'm not sure I ever gave like a clear definition of pleasure activism for me, so I'll do so now, just so I can throw it in there. I've got like 2 that I keep on a running basis, and one is that pleasure activism is the principle that any activism towards a better world should have pleasure in it. Like, while we're doing activism, we should be having fun, we should be taking care of each other, we should be meeting our and other people's needs in a balanced, reciprocal way. You know, I don't think that activism is sustainable unless it is pleasurable. So that's part 1. And then part 2 is that pleasure activism is activism for pleasure itself as a human right. And this is so important to me. I guess this leads to the last thing I want to say is that, you know, if there are people who are listening to this podcast and thinking or feeling some version of, wow, that's very nice, but, you know,
not for me.
Again, not for me. You know, like, I don't deserve, or I could never get, or, you know, I'm just, or, you know, the very, the very real reality that we also just need to, like, get through the day and, like, work our jobs and, like, pay the rent and feed our kids, all that kind of stuff. That makes so much sense that people would feel that way. And to me, the definition of liberation for all is a world where every person gets to have pleasure on an ongoing, abundant basis in their life, because that's what everyone deserves. Like, it's not that people only deserve to get to subsist or to get to vote, although voting is very important. It is that we deserve to enjoy our lives. I think that this is spiritual meaning, actually. So I guess that's what I would say is, for anyone, especially any activists out there who are listening to this and thinking, what is all this pleasure hokum? I mean, my invitation is, like, give it a try. And, like, what could become possible if pleasure was for you and for all of us?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's you're speaking my language, so preaching to the choir here. You know, and for anyone listening who maybe isn't an activist, or that's not a central part of your identification, anyone who chooses their erotic liberation, anyone who chooses to explore themselves sexually, intimately, in a deeper way, is doing a service to our collective liberation. You get more free, we get more free, right? And so that's what I'm hearing you speak to as well, Kai. And I just so appreciate you taking the time to define that, and absolutely everything you have shared here today. Again, just total pleasure to be in this conversation with you.
Very fun.
Where can the people come and fangirl or fan whatever gender you the way that I do? I love your Instagram, but where would you point them?
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, if people want to find me, I always get bashful at this part. I'm like, do people
No. I'm gonna pump you up.
Okay. I'll accept it. Yeah, so Instagram is great. I'm at Kai Cheng Thom. Also my website, kaichengthom.com, or my business website, ariseembodiment.org. People can also find me at the Embodied Lab a lot these days. And then I really invite people to check out the Institute for the Study of Somatic Sex Education, which is not just me, it's a whole collective of fabulous folks. Maybe even come and check out a course. You don't have to be a somatic sex educator to do one of our courses. We would love to see you and to support you in your pleasure.
Amazing. All of those links are going to be in the show notes for y'all. Please go follow Kai's work and support them. They are the author of some books you're definitely want to read that are on my bookshelf personally. And just again, deepest thanks. And for those listening, if you've loved what you've heard here today, please write us a review, share this episode, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. These conversations are here for you. We want to keep learning, growing, and going deeper together. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.